The Galactic Debt Collection Authority didn't usually handle cases this small. A mere 200,000 credits, barely enough to buy a decent shuttle, wouldn't normally warrant the attention of senior collector Vextharn. But this case was special. This case involved humans. Vextharn's three-fingered hand hovered over the holographic display as he reviewed the file for the 20th time. The debtor was one Dr. Elena Vasquez, a human xenobiologist who had taken out a loan to fund her research on the remote station Kepler 439. The research had failed. The loan had defaulted. Standard procedure dictated asset seizure and labor conscription until the debt was satisfied. What made it special was that no one had ever successfully collected from a human before. It wasn't that humans were particularly wealthy or powerful, quite the opposite. They were a recent addition to the galactic community, barely a century into their integration. They had no major military, no economic leverage, no political influence worth mentioning. But they had something else, something that made creditors nervous. They had each other. Every previous attempt to collect from a human had resulted in complications. The Tholian Syndicate had tried to repossess a human trader's ship and found themselves facing a blockade of 50 human vessels, all civilian, all unarmed, all absolutely refusing to move until the debt was, quote, renegotiated. The Creditors Guild had attempted to conscript a human engineer and discovered that every human in a 50 light-year radius had simultaneously quit their jobs in protest. The species was economically insignificant individually, but seemed capable of mobilizing collectively in ways that defied both logic and self-interest. But Vextharn was confident. He had a plan. The auction house on Creditors Prime was packed. Word had spread through the usual channels. A human was being put up for labor conscription. The gallery was filled with representatives from a dozen species, all curious to see if the GDCA could actually pull it off. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the auction platform, her hands bound by energy restraints, her face carefully neutral. She was a small woman for human standards, dark hair pulled back, her brown eyes scanning the crowd with what Vextharn had learned to recognize as that peculiar human quality, assessment. She wasn't afraid, she was calculating. Lot 447, Vextharn announced, his translator rendering his words into standard galactic. Dr. Elena Vasquez, human, age 37 standard years, xenobiologist specialist with advanced degrees in exoecology and genetic adaptation, defaulted on a research loan of 200,000 credits, labor conscription for a period of 10 standard years or until debt is satisfied with interest. Bidding starts at 50,000 for 1 year of service. The crowd murmured. 10 years was the maximum legal conscription period, but most labor contracts were bought out in months once the debtor's family or community raised the funds. For humans, everyone expected the conscription to last approximately 48 hours. 50,000, came a voice from the back, a Keltharian mining consortium. 55,000, countered a Dralix pharmaceutical company. The bidding was perfunctory, almost polite. Everyone knew what would happen next. The question wasn't whether Elena Vasquez would be freed, it was how long it would take and how much disruption the humans would cause. 100,000 for a 1-year contract, Vextharn announced. Going once, I'll take the full 10 years for 2 million. The auction house fell silent. Every head turned to locate the speaker. A figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the gallery, tall, bipedal, wearing the distinctive dark uniform of the Kryn Empire's military. The Kryn were known throughout the galaxy for 3 things: their military prowess, their ruthless efficiency, and their complete disregard for galactic opinion. Ambassador Krillix, Vextharn said, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. "The Kryn Empire wishes to purchase a human labor contract?" "Not the Empire," Krillix replied, his voice a low growl. "Myself, personal purchase." This changed everything. The Kryn Empire was one of the galactic powers that humans couldn't effectively pressure. They were too isolated, too self-sufficient, too militarily powerful to care about human boycotts or protests. But Vextharn was confident. He had a plan.
2 million credits for 10 years, Vextharn repeated. "Does anyone wish to counter?" Silence. 2 million credits was an absurd price for a single labor contract, 10 times the actual debt value. No one was going to match it. "Sold to Ambassador Krillix. The contract will be finalized within the hour." As the crowd dispersed, Vextharn allowed himself a small smile. He had successfully processed the first human debt collection in galactic history. The precedent was set. The GDCA could handle humans after all. He didn't notice the expression of Elena Vasquez's face as she was led away. He didn't see the slight smile, the look of someone whose plan was proceeding exactly as expected, because Elena Vasquez hadn't defaulted on her loan by accident. 3 days later, the first message arrived at human diplomatic channels. It was brief, professionally worded, and absolutely unprecedented. "To the human collective, Dr. Elena Vasquez, human citizen, has been purchased for labor conscription by Kryn Ambassador Krillix. Per Galactic Labor Conscription Law, Article 47, family members may negotiate for contract release. We await your response. Regards, Galactic Debt Collection Authority." The human response was equally brief. "Acknowledged. No negotiation necessary. Vasquez's contract is considered valid and binding." This message caused more panic in the galactic diplomatic community than any previous human action. Humans didn't abandon their own. It was their defining characteristic, the thing that made them simultaneously admirable and deeply frustrating to deal with. For them to simply accept one of their own being conscripted was unthinkable, unless it was a trap. Ambassador Krillix didn't care about galactic paranoia. He had acquired exactly what he needed, a human xenobiologist with expertise in genetic adaptation. He had plans for Dr. Vasquez, plans that would benefit the Kryn Empire enormously. The Kryn homeworld of Kryn Char was a fortress world, covered with military installations and defense platforms. Krillix's personal research facility was located in the northern continent, far from prying eyes. It was here that Elena Vasquez was brought, still in restraints, still silent. "Dr. Vasquez," Krillix said as she was escorted into his office, "I'm sure you're wondering why I paid such an exorbitant amount for your services." Elena looked at him steadily. "I assume you want my expertise in xenobiology. More specifically, I want your expertise in genetic adaptation." He pulled up a holographic display. "The Kryn are warrior species. We have been for thousands of years. But we face a problem. Our biology hasn't kept pace with modern warfare. We're strong, yes, but we lack the adaptability of other species. We can't survive in hostile environments without extensive technological support. We can't adapt to different planetary conditions. We're evolutionarily stagnant." "And you think I can help with that?" Elena asked. "I know you can. Your research on adaptive gene expression in hostile environments is the most advanced in the galaxy. You may have failed to secure funding through legitimate channels, but your work is brilliant. I want you to apply that brilliance to Kryn biology. You want me to make you more adaptable? I want you to make us perfect." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "And if I refuse?" "You can't. You're conscripted labor. You'll work or you'll be placed in a neural compliance collar. I'd prefer your willing cooperation. The science will be better, but I don't require it. Then I suppose I should see your facilities. Krillix smiled. He expected more resistance. Humans were supposed to be difficult, but perhaps this one understood the reality of her situation. He should have been more suspicious. Over the next 6 months, Elena Vasquez worked in Krillix's laboratory. She studied Kryn biology, ran genetic analyses, developed theoretical frameworks for adaptive enhancement. She was given access to advanced equipment, comprehensive databases, and a small team of Kryn research assistants. She was also watched constantly. Krillix wasn't stupid. He knew humans were clever, prone to sabotage, likely to attempt escape. Security cameras monitored her every movement. Her communications were restricted. Her work was reviewed daily. And yet, the work progressed beautifully. "This is remarkable," Krillix said, reviewing her latest findings. "You've identified 17 genetic markers that could be modified to increase environmental adaptability." 18, actually, Elena corrected, pointing to a data cluster. This one was hidden in what looked like junk DNA. It's actually a dormant adaptation pathway. If we activate it, Kryn physiology could adjust to low oxygen environments within hours instead of weeks. How long until you can begin practical trials? 3 months for the first batch of genetic modifications, 6 months for comprehensive testing, a year before we'd be ready for living subjects. Krillix nodded slowly. Acceptable. Continue. What he didn't know was that every genetic marker Elena identified, every adaptation pathway she discovered, every modification she proposed was being quietly cataloged and transmitted through a method so simple that no one had thought to block it. Humans, it turned out, had a peculiar biological quirk. Their gut bacteria were extraordinarily diverse, adaptable, and capable of exchanging genetic information with remarkable efficiency. Elena's microbiome had been carefully engineered before her accidental debt default. Every day, as her body processed the food provided by the Kryn captives, her engineered bacteria were analyzing Kryn biological samples she came into contact with, encoding that information into their own DNA, and then being excreted. The Kryn disposed of human waste the same way most species did: incineration. What they didn't know was that bacterial spores could survive incineration, carried on air currents, eventually making their way to the planet's water system, where they would be filtered, processed, and eventually find their way onto outbound cargo ships as microscopic contaminants. It would take months for those spores to reach human space, but they would get there. And when they did, humanity would have a complete genetic blueprint of the Kryn species. 8 months into Elena's conscription, Elena was summoned to Krillix's office. She entered to find him standing at his window, looking out over the military installations that dotted the landscape. "Dr. Vasquez," he said without turning, "I've received interesting news from the Galactic Council." "Oh?" "The humans have filed a formal request. They wish to negotiate your release." Elena's heart rate increased slightly. "After 8 months?" "Indeed. Curious timing, don't you think?" He turned to face her. "Your people wait until you've provided me with invaluable research, until you've unlocked secrets of genetic adaptation that could transform my species, and then they decide they want you back? Maybe they finally raised the money. Perhaps, or perhaps they got what they wanted from your time here." Elena kept her face carefully neutral. "I don't understand." Krillix walked closer, his eyes narrowing. "Don't you? I've reviewed the security footage, all of it. You never tried to escape. You never sabotaged the research. You never even complained. For a human, that's unusual behavior." I'm a scientist. You gave me access to fascinating research and advanced equipment. Why would I complain? Because you're a conscripted laborer working against your will. Am I? I defaulted on a legitimate debt. The conscription is legal, and the work is genuinely interesting. Maybe I'm just pragmatic. Krillix studied her for a long moment. The humans are offering 5 million credits for your release. That's more than twice what I paid for your contract. That's generous of them. I'm not going to accept. Why not? Because you're too valuable. The work you've done here is worth far more than 5 million credits. You're going to continue your research for the full 10 years of your contract. That's your right as contract holder. Yes, it is. He leaned forward. But I want you to know something, Dr. Vasquez. I don't trust humans. I don't trust their timing, their sudden interest in your release, or your convenient expertise in exactly the field I needed. If I discover that this was all some elaborate human plot, if I find that you've compromised my research or my species in any way, the consequences will be severe. I understand. Do you? The Kryn don't play political games. They don't engage in diplomatic maneuvering or economic pressure. If we believe we've been...
Because they were looking for technology, for quantum entanglement communicators, for hidden data transmitters, for coded messages in her research notes. They never thought to check her gut bacteria. 18 months into the conscription, the Galactic Council received an unusual communication from the human collective. It was a formal research paper, peer-reviewed and published in the Journal of Xenogenetics. The title was Complete Genetic Analysis and Adaptive Potential of the Kryn Species, Opportunities and Vulnerabilities. The paper was comprehensive. It detailed every aspect of Kryn biology, from their cellular structure to their immune system responses. It identified their strengths, their physical power, their efficient metabolism, their redundant organ systems. It also identified their weaknesses, their vulnerability to certain toxins, their inability to process specific radiation frequencies, their genetic bottlenecks from millennia of selective breeding for warrior traits. The paper included detailed analyses of how to counter Kryn military advantages, how to develop chemical agents that would incapacitate them without affecting other species, how to create environmental conditions they couldn't adapt to, how to identify and exploit their genetic vulnerabilities. It was a complete blueprint for defeating the Kryn Empire, and it was authored by Dr. Elena Vasquez and the Human Collective Xenobiology Research Team. When Krillix read the paper, he felt something he rarely experienced: cold, overwhelming dread. "You used me," he said when Elena was brought into his office. "You deliberately defaulted on your debt, knowing you'd be conscripted. You manipulated the auction, somehow ensured I would bid. You spent 18 months studying my species, cataloging our biology, finding our weaknesses, all while pretending to work on our behalf. Actually, I spent 18 months doing exactly what you asked me to do. Every piece of research in that paper came from legitimate work on Kryn genetic adaptation. I never lied to you. I never sabotaged anything. I simply did good science. You betrayed. I betrayed nothing. You purchased a labor contract from a human xenobiologist. I provided you with excellent xenobiology research. That you failed to consider that xenobiology research inherently involves comprehensive analysis of the subject species isn't your fault." Krillix's hand moved to his sidearm. "You've given every species in the galaxy a weapon to use against us." "No, I've given every species in the galaxy knowledge. What they do with it is their choice. But let me tell you what's going to happen now. The human government has made you 6 offers to purchase my contract. You've refused all of them. That's your legal right. But here's what you don't understand about humans, Ambassador. We don't abandon our own. You abandoned you. You let yourself be conscripted without protest. We didn't abandon me. We invested in me. 18 months ago, humanity had minimal leverage against the Kryn Empire. You're too powerful, too isolated, too self-sufficient. We couldn't pressure you economically, couldn't threaten you militarily, couldn't influence you diplomatically. But now we have complete knowledge of your biology. Now every species that's ever had a conflict with the Kryn has access to your genetic vulnerabilities. Now your greatest strength, your warrior biology, has become a documented, analyzable, exploitable weakness. She stood up, despite still being in restraints. So here's what's going to happen. The human government is going to make you one final offer for my release. They're going to offer you 100 million credits, which is an absurd amount of money for a simple labor contract. You're going to accept that offer, and in exchange, humanity is going to agree to help you develop genetic countermeasures to the vulnerabilities I've documented. We're going to use our expertise in adaptive genetics to help you shore up your weaknesses, to make you more adaptable, to give you the evolutionary advantages you wanted in the first place.
Why would you do that? You have leverage now. You could demand anything. Because that's not how humans work. We don't seek domination. We seek equilibrium. Right now, the Kryn Empire has gone from being an untouchable military power to being a species with documented, exploitable vulnerabilities. That's dangerous for you, yes, but it's also destabilizing for the entire galactic community. If every species suddenly thinks they can defeat the Kryn, we're going to see conflicts escalate. We're going to see opportunistic attacks. We're going to see a lot of unnecessary deaths. Elena's voice softened slightly. We don't want that. We want a galaxy where the Kryn are strong enough that no one attacks them out of opportunity, but not so dominant that no one can check your power if you abuse it. We want balance, and we're willing to help you achieve that in exchange for my release and an agreement that the Kryn Empire will think twice before assuming humans are easy targets. Krillix was silent for a long time. This was all planned. From the beginning? The debt default was planned. My expertise was real. The research was legitimate. Everything else was just good science and patient execution. How did you transmit the data? We monitored everything. Elena smiled slightly. Did you know that human gut bacteria can survive for years in dormant spore form? They're remarkably resilient, and they have a tendency to spread everywhere humans go. It's actually a bit of a contamination problem in sterile environments. Krillix stared at her. Your own biology was the transmission vector? Turns out that being a squishy, vulnerable, biologically messy species has some advantages. The final offer came 3 days later. 100 million credits for Elena Vasquez's release, plus a mutual cooperation agreement on genetic research. The Kryn Empire accepted. When Elena was finally released and returned to human space, she was met by a delegation that included representatives from the Human Collective Government, the Xenobiology Research Directorate, and her own family, who she hadn't seen in 18 months. Her sister Maria was the first to embrace her. You could have told us the plan. Couldn't risk it. If you'd known, you might have acted differently. The whole thing only worked if everyone believed I was genuinely trapped. We were terrified for you. I know, I'm sorry. Elena pulled back, looking at the assembled delegation. But it worked. We've established that humans can't be safely exploited for labor conscription. We've gained comprehensive genetic data on one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, and we've opened diplomatic channels with the Kryn Empire that never existed before. The senior diplomat, Ambassador Chen, nodded slowly. The Galactic Debt Collection Authority has already announced changes to their policies. Human debt cases will now be handled through diplomatic channels rather than labor conscription. You've effectively closed that loophole for our entire species. Good, no one else should have to do what I did. Though I suspect, Ambassador Chen added with a slight smile, that the GDCA is now paranoid about every labor conscription case. They're going to be looking for hidden agendas and elaborate schemes everywhere. I shrugged. Not my problem. I'm a xenobiologist, not a diplomat. About that, Director Yuki Tanaka from the Xenobiology Research Directorate said, "The paper you co-authored has revolutionized our understanding of Kryn biology. We'd like you to lead a new research team focusing on cross-species genetic analysis, full funding, your choice of staff, and a guaranteed 20-year grant. No loans this time?" No loans. We learned that lesson. Elena considered for a moment. I have one condition. Whatever we learn, whatever genetic information we gather, it gets used to help species understand each other better, not as weapons, not as leverage, as tools for cooperation. That's a nice sentiment, Ambassador Chen said carefully, but information can be weaponized regardless of intent. I know, but intent matters. It shapes how research is conducted, what questions are asked, what applications are developed. If we start from a place of wanting to understand rather than wanting to exploit, we'll end up with better science and better outcomes. Director Yuki nodded. Agreed. Welcome to the team, Dr. Vasquez. As the delegation dispersed and Elena was finally allowed to go home, she found herself reflecting on the last 18 months. It had been dangerous. It had been lonely. There had been moments when she'd wondered if the Kryn would discover her methods, if the plan would fail, if she'd end up spending the full 10 years in conscription with nothing to show for it. But it worked. 6 months later, Ambassador Krillix made an unprecedented visit to human collective headquarters on Earth. He met with Elena in her new research facility, an all-art facility dedicated to xenobiological cooperation. Dr. Vasquez, he said formally, or should I say Dr. Manipulator? Elena smiled. I prefer Dr. Vasquez. Manipulator makes it sound more sinister than it was. You cost my empire significant strategic advantage. I gave the galaxy balance. There's a difference. Perhaps. He looked around the facility. I came to see what you're doing with your newfound fame and fortune. Research, what I've always done. Currently working on a fascinating project involving cross-species microbiome interactions. More biological espionage? More biological understanding. Did you know that most species in the galaxy have relatively simple gut bacteria? Humans have thousands of species in our microbiome. We are actually walking ecosystems. I'm studying how that affects our immune systems, our mental health, our ability to adapt to different environments. Krillix was quiet for a moment. The Kryn have begun implementing your recommendations, the genetic modifications to address our documented vulnerabilities. And? They work. Preliminary trials show significant improvements in environmental adaptability and resistance to the toxins you identified. My species will emerge from this stronger than we were before. That was always the goal. Was it? I still don't fully understand your motives, Dr. Vasquez. You could have demanded far more from us. You could have leveraged your knowledge for personal gain, for human political advantage, for any number of benefits. Instead, you ask for research funding and cooperation. Elena turned to face him fully.
Ambassador, do you know what humans learned during our first century in the galactic community? That you're cleverer than you appear? That we're not special. For thousands of years, we thought we might be alone in the universe. We built religions, philosophies, entire worldviews around the idea that humanity was unique. Then we found the galactic community and realized we're just another species, not particularly strong, not particularly advanced, not particularly important.
She gestured around her lab. This, what I do here, is my way of dealing with that reality. We're not special. We're not chosen. We're not destiny's favorites. We're just clever primates who happened to figure out faster than light travel. So if we want to matter, if we want to contribute something meaningful to the galaxy, it has to be through understanding, through building connections, through making the galaxy a place where species help each other rather than exploit each other. Noble sentiments, but the galaxy doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way yet, but maybe it could. Maybe if enough species start operating from a position of cooperation instead of competition, we can change the rules. Krillic studied her for a long moment. You really believe that? I spent 18 months in conscription working on research that could have been used to destroy your species. Instead, it's being used to strengthen both our peoples. So yes, I believe it, because I've seen it work. The Kryn ambassador nodded slowly. The Empire has authorized me to propose a formal research cooperation agreement. We have genetic data on 17 species you lack access to. You have expertise in adaptive genetics that we need. A mutual exchange of information could benefit both our peoples. Under what terms? Equal partnership, shared credit for discoveries, all findings published openly unless they pose genuine security risks, and a promise that the research will be used to strengthen species rather than exploit their weaknesses. Elena extended her hand. I think we can work with that. Krillic looked at her hand for a moment, then reached out and clasped it in the human gesture of agreement. His grip was strong enough to be uncomfortable, but careful enough not to cause injury. You are still dangerously clever, he said. And I still think your species needs to work on its trust issues, but we'll figure it out. After Krillic left, Elena returned to her work. Her assistant, a young human researcher named Michael, approached cautiously. Dr. Vasquez, can I ask you something? Of course. Was it worth it? 18 months in conscription? The risk? The isolation? Was it worth it? Elena considered the question carefully. Ask me that in 10 years. If the research cooperation with the Kryn leads to breakthroughs in genetic medicine, if the precedent we set prevents other species from being exploited, if the galactic community becomes slightly more cooperative and slightly less predatory, then yes, it will have been worth it. And if it doesn't, then I'll have spent 18 months doing fascinating research on one of the galaxy's most interesting species, and I'll have a really good story to tell at conferences. Either way, not a bad outcome. Michael laughed. You're either the bravest person I know or the craziest. Can't I be both? As the months passed, the full impact of Elena's actions began to ripple through the galactic community. The Galactic Debt Collection Authority reformed its labor conscription policies, making it nearly impossible to exploit skilled professionals from politically connected species. Several other species began publishing their own genetic research openly, reasoning that transparency was safer than secrecy in a galaxy where biological espionage was apparently feasible. The Kryn Empire, true to their agreement, began sharing genetic data from their extensive military medical files. This led to breakthroughs in understanding cross-species disease transmission, which led to better quarantine protocols, which led to saved lives across dozens of worlds.
Human diplomatic status in the galactic community shifted subtly but significantly. They went from being viewed as economically insignificant newcomers to being recognized as a species that played long games and won through cleverness rather than force. Not everyone was happy about it. The Tholian Syndicate, still bitter about the blockade incident years earlier, began spreading rumors that humans were biological saboteurs, that Elena's research was just the beginning of a broader campaign of biological warfare. The Creditors Guild, furious about losing the labor conscription revenue stream, started refusing loans to human applicants altogether. Several military powers began developing countermeasures to human biological intelligence gathering, treating Earth's diaspora as potential intelligence assets. But Elena, working in her lab, surrounded by samples and data and the steady hum of advanced equipment, didn't worry too much about galactic politics. She had proven something important, that humans, despite being physically weak, economically insignificant, and politically inexperienced, could still matter. They could still contribute. They could still change things. Not through conquest or domination, but through understanding, through patience, through the careful application of knowledge in service of cooperation rather than exploitation. It was, she thought, a very human way to make a difference. 5 years after her release, Elena was invited to present at the Galactic Xenobiology Conference, the most prestigious scientific gathering in known space. Her keynote address was titled Biological Intelligence in Service of Cooperation: Lessons from the Kryn Genetic Research Project. The auditorium was packed. Representatives from every major species in the galactic community were present. Even Krillix attended, sitting in the front row with a delegation of Kryn military scientists. Elena stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled researchers, diplomats, and observers. 5 years ago, she began, I defaulted on a loan. This probably seems an unusual way to start a scientific keynote, but bear with me. That default led to my labor conscription, which led to 18 months studying Kryn biology, which led to the publication of comprehensive genetic research that changed how our galactic community thinks about biological information. She pulled up a holographic display showing the now famous genetic maps of Kryn biology. When this research was first published, there was significant controversy. Some called it an act of espionage, others called it a betrayal of trust. Many worried it would lead to increased biological warfare and genetic exploitation across the galaxy. Those fears were not unfounded, but something interesting happened instead. Species began publishing their own genetic data, not because they wanted to, but because secrecy was no longer a viable strategy in a galaxy where biological intelligence gathering was apparently feasible. The result was the greatest expansion of xenobiological knowledge in recorded history. In 5 years, we've learned more about cross-species genetics than in the previous 5 decades. We've developed new medical treatments, new environmental adaptation technologies, new understanding of how life evolves in different conditions. She changed the display to show a network map of research collaborations. More importantly, we've started working together. The Kryn genetic data led to cooperation with human researchers, which led to joint projects with Dralix biochemists, which led to information sharing with Keltharian medical facilities. The network grew organically, driven not by political agreements, but by scientific curiosity and mutual benefit. This is what happens when species choose understanding over exploitation, when we recognize that biological knowledge isn't a weapon to be hoarded, but a tool to be shared.
She paused, looking directly at Krillix. I want to be clear about something. What I did 5 years ago was risky. It was ethically complicated. It involved deception and manipulation.
I don't recommend it as a general strategy for scientific advancement, but it proved something important, that even in a galaxy full of species more powerful than humanity, clever application of knowledge can create positive change. The question facing all of us now is simple. Do we continue down the path of cooperation and shared knowledge, or do we retreat back to secrecy, competition, and the hoarding of biological information? The applause was thunderous, not universal, but substantial, enough to show that the message had resonated. After the presentation, Krelix approached her. "Well played, Dr. Vasquez. Thank you, Ambassador. You turned an act of espionage into a call for scientific cooperation. Only a human could manage that level of rhetorical gymnastics." Elena smiled. "I prefer to think of it as reframing. Perspective matters." "Indeed it does. The Kryn Empire wishes to extend our research cooperation agreement for another 10 years. We'd be honored. We're also," his tone becoming more serious, "ready to discuss sharing military medical data that we've kept classified, data on genetic engineering experiments, combat adaptations, biological augmentation research." "That's significant. What changed?" "You did. 5 years ago, my empire viewed genetic information as a military asset to be protected at all costs. You demonstrated that treating it as a shared resource can be more valuable than keeping it secret. It's taken time for our leadership to accept that reality, but they have. I'm glad. That data could lead to major medical breakthroughs. It will also reveal significant vulnerabilities in Kryn military augmentation programs." "I know. Are you comfortable with that?" Krelix was quiet for a moment. "We're learning to be. The galaxy is changing, Dr. Vasquez. Species that don't adapt will be left behind. The Kryn are many things, but we're not fools. If cooperation is the future, we'll cooperate. If transparency is the new strategic reality, we'll be transparent. We'll simply ensure we're better at it than everyone else." "That's very Kryn of you." "We are who we are, but we're learning who we could be. That's progress." 10 years after her release, Elena Vasquez published her second landmark paper. This one was titled "The Microbiome Hypothesis: How Biological Interconnection Drives Galactic Evolution." The paper presented a radical idea that the galaxy's intelligent species were not as separate as they believed. Through millennia of trade, travel, and contact, they had been exchanging microbiomes, viruses, and even genetic material. They were, in effect, becoming one vast interconnected biological system. The paper argued that this interconnection was driving subtle but significant evolutionary changes across all species, that humans were becoming more adapted to low-gravity environments because of exposure to orbital bacteria, that Kryn were developing increased radiation resistance from contact with spacefaring species, that every intelligent species in the galaxy was slowly, invisibly adapting to each other. The implications were staggering. If species were biologically interconnected, then harming one species could have cascading effects on others. Environmental damage on one world could spread through biological vectors to affect distant systems. Genetic modifications, if not carefully managed, could propagate through the galactic ecosystem in unpredictable ways. The paper was controversial. Many species rejected the idea that they were being contaminated by contact with aliens. Several governments tried to implement strict biological quarantine protocols. Religious groups declared the interconnection hypothesis to be either heresy or divine providence, depending on their theology. But slowly, inevitably, the scientific evidence became overwhelming. Independent research teams confirmed Elena's findings.
The galactic community was interconnected, biologically intertwined in ways that made the traditional concept of species separation obsolete. And that changed everything. Trade agreements had to account for biological exchange. Environmental regulations had to consider cross-species impacts. Medical research had to become collaborative by necessity. The galaxy, whether it wanted to or not, was becoming a biological community. Elena, now in her late 40s and recognized as one of the most influential xenobiologists in galactic history, still spent most of her time in the lab. She had offers to become a diplomat, a politician, a corporate executive. She turned them all down. "I'm a scientist," she told her sister Maria during one of their regular calls. "I study things, I learn things, I share what I learn. That's what I'm good at. Let other people handle the politics." "You changed the galaxy, Elena." "I shared some research. The galaxy changed itself." "That's remarkably modest for someone who was named Galactic Scientist of the Decade." Elena shrugged. "It's just recognition for doing what I love. I'd be doing this work regardless of awards or fame." "And the conscription? Do you regret it?" Elena considered the question carefully. "No, it was necessary. Someone had to prove that humans couldn't be safely exploited. Someone had to demonstrate that biological knowledge could be used for cooperation instead of competition. It happened to be me. I happened to have the right expertise and the right level of risk tolerance. But if it wasn't for me, it would have been someone else eventually." "I think you underestimate your own courage." "Maybe. Or maybe I just understood that some things are worth taking risks for. A galaxy where species cooperate instead of compete, where knowledge is shared instead of hoarded, where being clever matters as much as being strong. That's worth 18 months of conscription." As Elena ended the call and returned to her latest research project, a comprehensive study of viral exchange between spacefaring species, she reflected on how far humanity had come in such a short time. A century ago, humans had been alone in the universe. 50 years ago, they were the newest, weakest members of the galactic community. Today, they were recognized as a species that punches above their weight class through cleverness, cooperation, and a willingness to take calculated risks. It wasn't that humans were special. They weren't. They were still physically weak, still economically insignificant compared to established powers, still newcomers learning the rules. But they figured out something that gave them an edge despite their disadvantages. They had learned that in a galaxy full of stronger species, you don't win through force. You win through understanding, through patience, through building connections and finding leverage in unexpected places, and most importantly, through refusing to abandon your own. Elena thought about her conscription often, about standing on that auction platform, bound and isolated, knowing that her entire species was counting on her to execute a plan that could easily fail. About 18 months of careful research, subtle information gathering, and constant vigilance under the watchful eyes of the Kryn. About the moment when she had finally been released, when the plan had worked, when she had proven that humans could not be safely exploited. That moment, Elena thought, was when humanity had truly earned its place in the galactic community, not through military might or economic power, but through demonstrating that they protected their own at any cost. The debt collection attempt had been meant to establish precedent, to show that humans could be pressured through legal mechanisms like any other species. Instead, it had established a different precedent, that humans were willing to turn their own disadvantages into weapons, that human biology, messy and vulnerable as it was, could be leveraged for intelligence gathering, that human cleverness, applied patiently and carefully, could achieve what human strength never could. No one had tried to conscript a human since.
Elena smiled to herself as she returned to studying her viral samples. The galaxy was a complicated place, full of dangers and opportunities, and species all trying to survive and thrive. But it was also, increasingly, a place where cooperation was possible, where knowledge could be shared, where even the weakest species could make a difference. And that, Elena thought, was a galaxy worth living in.